by the fitness test we participated in. The graphs display this idea that our breathing rates increase during exercise, which is what we would expect to see if we compare this with the previous graph or any typical graph. We have a similar pattern because as our breathing rate was also elevated at the pre-test of both the Wingate and multi-stage fitness tests, showing that the participant was perhaps feeling nervous or had a sudden rush of adrenaline as before the test began. As we increased the incrementals in each level of the multi-stage fitness test, we saw that the rate and depth of breathing became faster and deeper. This is because in order to cope with the demands of the intensity, we have to replenish the oxygen debt that is accumulated so we can continue to perform and cope with the intensities over the longer duration. We also found that the breathing rate remained elevated for a duration after both the Wingate test and multi-stage fitness test, due to the fact that during this recovery period, the body is trying to expel the carbon dioxide and lactic acid waste products to allow the acid balance of the muscles to return to neutral. So the larger the duration, the longer the ventilation rate will remain elevated because of the larger oxygen debt which has been accumulated. And as we can see during the Wingate, the athlete at rest had a breathing rate of around 10 breaths per minute, and then you can see at the post-test it went up to about 28 breaths per minute. So we can see this increase. And from the pre-test, we can see as we increase the resistance that the athlete during the 20 seconds breathing rate shot up at an increased rate. Also, we can see for the multi-stage fitness test that at rest we had a slight elevated breathing rate, and as we increased the levels, specifically from the pre-test to level 2, we saw a much steeper gradient for the increase in breaths from about 12 to 25, and then as we increased levels 4 to 8, we can see that it continued to increase due to the athlete working harder, and it remained elevated at the post-test. In order for an athlete to improve their lung capacity and to sustain their performance for a long duration, they would need to undergo cardiovascular methods of training, like the Cooper's Run test, in order to help their heart become more efficient, but also in order to help gas exchange and to increase the amount of oxygen that can be inhaled and expel the waste products at a faster rate. During intense sessions focusing on muscular endurance or anaerobic fitness, respiration rate and depth may remain elevated for around 20 to 40 minutes after the workout, as studies have shown. When it comes to exercise, the respiratory and cardiovascular systems are largely geared to the intake and supply of oxygen for energy and removal of the waste products. For these reasons, we expect the greatest response of these systems to occur with training that relies on oxygen for energy and produces significant amounts of carbon dioxide and lactate. In the multi-stage fitness test and the Wingate test, we only measure our breathing rates in order to calculate our ventilation. We substitute in the average values for tidal volume in order to estimate roughly the amount of air we inspired and expired per breath. So this allows us to calculate an average value of our ventilation from substituting in average values of tidal volume and using our breathing rates from these tests. Now we're going to look at the sport application and analyse some examples of sports. So in netball, which is a team sport and uses both it requires anaerobic and aerobic fitness, during the game the players' breathing rates will depend on the intensity and the duration that needs to be sustained in different phases of the game. For example, by jumping to receive a pass or sprinting for the ball will cause the player's breathing rate to increase. This is due to the fact that they're suddenly working a lot harder than just from jogging back into position. It is more relevant for positions such as centre, who will have a higher breathing rate than players like goal shooter or goalkeeper, because they have a much more vital role on the court, which requires them to move around a lot more, as they are allowed in all 3/3, as opposed to goal shooter and goalkeeper, which are only allowed in the attacking and defending third. This is because they need to attack when their team has possession and to pass the ball around the court, and to defend when the other team intercepts or is in possession of the ball. The position requires them to be moving at a higher intensity compared to other players on the court that have a more static role. Centre is constantly moving around and therefore will be working harder throughout the game. This in turn causes their breathing rate, tidal volume, to increase, which then has an effect increasing their ventilation rate. So they are expelling and inhaling more air per minute. This is similar to the multi-stage fitness test, as the participants were having to work over a longer period of time as the intensity changed and we increased the incrementals. So in order to make the player work harder, and the same in netball, the centre really has to work hard in order to move the ball from into the attacking third. But an interception from the other team could result in the centre having to mark and play a more defensive role to try to win the ball back. So the centre does not really have time to recover and to replenish the oxygen stores. While the other positions, like goal shooting and goalkeeper, have a more static role on the pitch, and just to defend the shot and to score the goals, they have more time to recover and have similar results to that of the Wingate test, as they are not moving for more than around 20 seconds. As a shot in netball, you are only allowed 3 seconds, so they have more time to recover before they receive the ball for the next shot. And similar to rowing sprints, the athletes have suddenly increased the intensity, so their breathing rate and tidal volume are immediately increased, and therefore gaseous exchange has to become more efficient in order to try to expel the waste products out of the body and try to inspire more air and oxygen to meet the demand to sustain the performance, so they don't fatigue before the 200-meter finishes. Because they're having to work really hard, especially the muscles of the arm, in order to force the oars to power the boat through. So they don't have time to rest like in netball. So it's all about the duration and the intensity. They need to have the oxygen in order to provide